My friend Finn and I decided we were going to go on a camping and fishing trip on the west coast of Scotland. The aim of this trip was to try and base as much of our diet off what we could catch whilst we were out there. And here's how it went.
We used to sing sha la 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 da, just like that. Sha la 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 da.
Well, we're here, man. We've landed at the spot on the beach. For now, we're setting up just in those trees next to a little barn. The plan is to try and stay sheltered, mostly out of the rain, but also hopefully out of the wind. So we're just doing we've dumped our stuff down there. We're going to do a 5-minute scour just around the shore to see if we can find anything better. So this was our home for the next 2 days. First thing in order was to get the tent up as soon as possible. We just wanted to keep our stuff dry and out of the elements because the forecast was not looking in our favour. Once we got the tent up, I volunteered to go back to the car to pick up whatever stuff we couldn't carry with us the first time in our first trip. I left Finn to his own devices to set up the rest of the camp and make sure our tent, our new home, was looking nice and bougie, to which he did a magnificent job. I've left Finn at the campsite. I'm on my way back to the car to get the rest of the stuff. It's only a one-man job, so I volunteer. But just wanted to have a wee peek in this building because I didn't go in it on the way past. So let's see what's happening. So this building is Aron Mill. It's an old corn mill. Corn referring to the many different types of grain that would actually be used and ground up in this mill. It's difficult to tell how long this mill has actually been here, but it's been documented as far back as 1693, so over 300 years ago. As a corn mill, the surrounding township of Ballamore, which may have only consisted of maybe as few as 5 to 10 properties really, they would bring their harvested grain to the mill, where it would then be ground up into flour. Aron Mill used a redirected water course as hydropower to turn a water wheel, which would then power the turning of the top grindstone. This grindstone would then grind up the grain into flour, and that flour was then most commonly used to feed the livestock in the winter months when grazing was poor. And that is my crash course on the history of this mill. I mean, that's why you gotta love Scotland, because there's just these little pockets, these little like treasure troves of history that I'm just so lucky to have on my back doorstep. Actually, I just saw this, and that there is the mill stone that they used to use. First cast of the trip. Knowing me, it wasn't long till we had our rods out and we were fishing. Right. Yep. And within moments,
some weeds.
I caught weeds. Of course I did. This turned out to be a bit of a theme for the next few hours, but nevertheless, we persevered.
Let's move.
So it's points on the scoreboard for me with my little tiny pollock. And it's gone. The least majestic release. It just flopped out my hand. I wanted to show you its amazing colours, but oh well. We did go up the other way on the other side of the beach, but we had no luck. I had a big one, but it fell off. I'll call it a big one because it fell off.
Apart from that, we had absolutely nothing. Saw some otters though, but the fishing hasn't been great. And a seal, but the fishing hasn't been great. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the fillets off this mackerel, and then we're going to pan fry it and use the head and the guts as bait for these crab pots that I brought. Hopefully that'll help us get some more food for tomorrow. Oh.
Otherwise we're fucked.
So this, if you didn't know, is a mackerel. It's an Atlantic mackerel. They're fast predatory fish, closely related to tuna. They have no swim bladder, which means they can change depth rapidly and must keep moving all of the time. Mackerel are the fastest swimming fish in UK waters, able to swim around 50 metres in 10 seconds. Even the small ones put up a great fight once hooked. But yeah, they're one of my favourite fish to catch and eat because they have a nice firm texture. So they're not always easy to find, but once you find them, you can get bucket loads. And they're a really abundant fish in the summer months. What I'm doing here is actually my favourite way of preparing them, which is filleting them. So I pretty much take the slices of meat off each side, and then what I do is I just pan fry that, and it allows you to quickly and reasonably easily take the meat off without most of the bones. You do still get bones.
So we're going to stick right on the pan.
Right, whack a bit more butter.
Got done in by phone. How is it, Finn?
Mint, mate. Mint.
What you got there?
Pretty much Michelin star.
So that was day one. Did a bit of traunching along the coast, fishing different spots. Saw some otters and a seal, but the fishing wasn't very good. So we moved to the other side of camp where I caught my first fish, which was a small pollock. Put it back though, it wasn't big enough. Caught that nice mackerel that we had for dinner, which sustained us for the evening. And after that, with all the walking, we just passed out.
As you can see, it's day 2. We survived the night in the tent, me and Finn. Mate, it was a lovely sleep. My Garmin was telling me I got an 89 sleep score, so that's better than most nights I get in my bed, to be fair. It was a wee bit windy, a wee bit wet, so everything's a bit damp. So things like firewood are going to be a bit trickier to find, but it's not an issue. What I'm doing is I'm just walking over to the beach, because where we set up camp is sort of in the trees to hopefully shelter us a bit from the elements. What I'm doing is just walking over to the beach to sort of see what the sea conditions are, because it's low tide in about an hour, and we're thinking of picking up the crab pots that we put out, as well as also possibly going for a dip. It sounds pretty wild because the wind direction has actually changed from a westerly to a southerly wind, which often brings with it a lot of waves, or can do, at least for this beach. So I can see it right now, it looks pretty wavy.
So in this clip I'm actually trying to explain to you why the westerlies don't affect us as much as the southerlies in this where we actually were. So pretty much the westerlies, which is the winds coming from the west, they're actually blocked by this big natural wall, which is the Point of Nap. Leaves us in the yellow area a lot more protected, whereas the southerly winds, where that sort of red lines are, where we are, there's just no protection. And so that's why it was so windy. The winds were going to change, and in the afternoon it was going to be more westerlies than southerlies.
So what we might do is when the wind direction changes back to a westerly, maybe hop in the water then. But it's something we'll have to play by ear, because it can be quite hard to, it can be very difficult to predict these things, you know what I mean? But we're going to go collect the crab pots. It's too windy to hop in the water, I'd say. We're just going to go collect the pots, see what we got, because We left them in for a full tide cycle. It leaves it exposed for long enough so that all the creatures can find it. All the yummy creatures. Finn thinks we have a lobster. I'm not so convinced, mate.
So this is us getting battered by the elements as we try and lift up the pots. We got some nice velvet swimming crabs, which are edible. That was going to be our lunch, so we were pleased with that after our singular mackerel that we had for dinner last night. And this is us lifting the second pot. I was pretty gassed because we got a couple of edible crabs, and Finn was really interested in all the little fish swimming about in the pot. So what we actually got here is we got 2 brown crabs, also known as edible crabs. They're the more popular crabs in the UK. They kind of look like cartoon crabs, but as you can see, we got a little velvet as well. They're actually called velvet crabs because they have like hair along their body, especially on their back, and it gives that sort of velvety texture. They also have these flattened back legs which allow them to swim when they're in the water, which is where they get the swimming in their name from.
A Ballan wrasse.
Ballan wrasse? We got 2 wrasse actually. I'm pretty sure they're Ballan wrasse. And we also got a bearded rockling. So this one here I believe is a 3-bearded rockling. It gets its name from the 3 barbels on the front of its head. They're actually in the same family as the cod, which is the fish that puts the fish in fish and chips. They kind of resemble eels. They've got very slimy, scaleless skin and are very hard to keep a hold of, as you can probably see. This one went back safe and sound because there was not a chance I was going to eat it no matter how hungry I was.
Nice orange wrasse.
Let's get out of the corner. I can't.
So once we released the fish and played gladiator with the little velvet crab, we then started heading back. We released the brown edible crabs because they were too small. The minimum keeping size of a brown edible crab in Scotland is 14 centimetres across the carapace, and then for a velvet crab it's 70 millimetres or 7 centimetres across the carapace. They are an absolute pain to get out the crab pots. But yeah, I popped down to the shore to get some seawater to boil them in, and it was Finn's job to get them out of the pots. We then ate them for lunch. They were absolutely delicious. A bit of a sweet and salty flavour going on because we boiled them in the salt water, and then the actual meat. No idea where the sweetness comes from, but it's delicious. We have just eaten the crabs. We are now getting changed and going swimming. Going snorkeling, see what we can find. The weather's still a bit wild, but as long as we stick together, we should be alright. But the crabs were delicious. Very sweet meat. A sort of a sweet and salty flavour to them. Reggie fell asleep and had a nap. It was sensational. I think the best nap I've ever had in my life. I think the cold water really took it out of us. Miraculously, the sun's out. So we're going to capitalise on this. The waves are looking a bit calmer as well, and we're gonna go fishing. See if we can catch ourselves some dinner. So we set off from camp hoping to catch dinner with a new lease of life after our rejuvenating nap. So as we were walking along the shore, I saw this humongous bird's nest just hanging off the cliffs. Now, my immediate thoughts were that this had to be an eagle's nest just due to its size. About 30 minutes later, my suspicions were confirmed as I saw this big bird flying about. From that distance, I couldn't tell if it was a golden eagle or a sea eagle, but to me, that's as clear as it gets. It was definitely an eagle. With the lack of fishing success, my patience was starting to fade, and I found myself admiring the wet weather systems in the distance that were drifting over the hills. My attention also turned to the rocks, remains of urchins as well as lobsters. And then in the rock pools there were countless anemones. These guys are actually called beadlet anemones. They are apparently very territorial, and they use their tentacles to sting and catch passing prey like crabs, shrimp and small fish, as well as to defend their turf.
Stop letting your finger be sucked by urchins, you dirty boy.
That's an anemone,
And then it was no fucking thing.
and that's That's a little mussel.
So after renewing my interest in fishing, I started to find some success. We got a few fish on the stringer and managed to rebuild our confidence.
The weather's starting to come in. It's looking mixed. At least we have dinner. We're a couple of mackerel.
Been retaining those two.
So with our heads held high, we marched back to camp ready to put the fish on the pan and get them cooked before the weather got truly horrendous.
Well, it's pissing it down, but it doesn't matter because we got the mackerel cooked and the flatbreads have been spiced and buttered to perfection.
spiced.
Oh, look at that. That is a fish flatbread wrap.
After a while, the stormy weather blew over and we decided make the most of the lovely evening and get one last fishing session in before we went to bed. I managed to hook myself a sand eel. And as you can see, similar to the bearded rockling, they are pretty hard to keep a hold of. Quite surprisingly, Finn managed to catch himself a mackerel from the beach. Most likely they were feeding on the sand eels, and that's why he caught it in such shallow waters. We woke up to the sound of rain on the tent, and we knew it was time to get ready to go home. Finn packed up first, so he decided he'd make the first trip and leave me to pack up the rest of camp before he got back. I wasn't too fussed because I had a pretty slow start, to be fair.
So that's us all packed up, ready to go back, re-enter civilization. It's been a lovely trip. We saw an abundance of wildlife. Somehow, we also managed to make the most of the miserable weather. The little barn that we camped next to has almost doubled in height since we first got here. That's how much rain there's been.
So that was it. We said goodbye to our little campsite and made a direct route for home.
I pictured a rainbow. You held it in your hands. I had flashes. But you saw the plan. I wandered out in the world for years. While you just stayed in your room.
Successful.
I saw the crescent. You saw the whole of the moon. The whole of the moon.
What the fuck is he doing? Oh god, he's fucking weirdo. Fucking weirdo. There's nothing there to film.